The economic consequences of a protracted trade conflict would be severe, but it would be very different, a very different shock than the COVID-19 shock.
Yeah, right. What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Hizzy Hustle. We got a little special guest today. This is Bruin, or LeBron. He is a recent foster with Pause It Forward here in the Okanagan. We have been rescuing dogs for just a few months now and have been thoroughly enjoying it. But this little St. Bernard pit bull here is looking for a home. So if any of you guys are interested, I know he wants to get back to his nap. He, like many others, will always need a home. Back to bed. All right. So yeah, that's my little PSA for today. Yeah, adopt, don't shop. And we support it. Tons of awesome, amazing rescues out there helping animals. I know a lot of people don't like the idea of shopping at a shelter, but there are so many good dogs out there. All my dogs are rescues, and I love them. So, anyways, welcome back to another episode of the Hizzy Hustle. As you know, my name is Tyler Heisman, local realtor here in the Okanagan. Just wanted to make a little bit of a touch back on the potential tariffs. We know that reprieve is coming to an end here at the start of March. So we have Tiff Macklin just kind of going over a little bit of what he thinks from Global News, and we can kind of touch base on what they think is going on. It's a very generalized thing. I think a lot of what's going on in this situation is that, for one, the U.S. is being a lot more loud, to say the least, about what they're planning on doing. I'd just like to bring everyone back to 2017, 2018, when the steel and aluminum tariffs originally came on at 25%. I just want to ask how many people of you guys remember that, because, 7 or 8 years ago, when Trump originally came into the Oval Office, I was at a different point in my life, right? I was in my early 20s. I wasn't as politically in tuned or economically in tuned. Like I said, I was working in the oil field when I was earlier. So, there was just an opportunity for me to kind of be frivolous with my money and, not necessarily have to care as much. But, I could tell you right now that, like, the job market and the economy didn't get impacted by it. Maybe it's because we're not as vulnerable as we were or as we are now back then, so it just didn't impact us as much. We're a lot worse off now independently than we were, 8 years ago or so. So maybe it's just something to think about. Maybe it's just people kind of getting ahead of themselves a little bit. Maybe people are educating themselves more than they used to. But yeah, I can tell you right now, I don't remember the first round of tariffs hitting. So who knows how bad this is going to be. But let's tune into Tiff Macklin here and see what the Bank of Canada has to say about all this good fun stuff. Sorry, I just gotta edit this window a little bit. I dislike editing a lot, so I do a lot of this like live stream style editing, so it just makes
The economic consequences of a protracted trade conflict would be severe, but it would be very different, a very different shock than the COVID-19 shock. In the pandemic, we had a steep recession followed by a rapid recovery as the economy reopened. This time, if tariffs are long-lasting and broad-based, there won't be a bounce back. We may eventually regain our current rate of growth, but the level of output will be permanently lower. It's more than a shock. It's a structural change. The first thing we would...
And this is kind of the point that I've been making myself, very loosely, is just the fact that, we're in this position because we put ourselves in this position. It's as simple as that. Canada had the ability to be an economic powerhouse, and they still do, yet we're constantly fighting regulatory changes and government input and, their effect on the industries and how they can choose to grow, right? Like, as much as climate change I know is a real thing, you're hindering Canadians' ability to create good paying, capital producing jobs when you're trying to tax every step or regulate every step of the process, right? Like, bring the free market back. I think that's going to be one of the biggest things that helps Canada out, and just, dropping these regulations, man. Like, this government bureaucracy bloated sector that we have, it just eats so much profit and so much capital from these companies that they have no choice but to increase the prices, because they're not going to pay out of their pocket for the extra payments and extra BS that they have to go through to get approved and to get these projects finished, right?
See, is a marked decline in exports. As Canadian goods become more expensive, U.S. demand for those goods would decline. A lower Canadian dollar would provide a partial offset. In our model, with the scenario based on the February 1 executive order, exports fall by about 8.5% in the year after tariffs takes effect. That's the green line. Canadian exporters respond by cutting production and laying off workers. With exports to the United States accounting for roughly 1/4 of our national income, the shock will be felt across Canada. Lower export revenues would reduce household income, and retaliatory tariffs would raise the prices of many consumer goods. As a result,
and this is another thing too, like, we're really playing with fire here. We got to be super, super careful. Canada has the potential to go bankrupt here. It's unfortunate, but it's true.
Consumer spending on everything from cars to entertainment to housing would slow. With export and consumer demand weakening, Canadian businesses would also cut their investment spending. And higher costs and lower profit margins would restrain investment further.
Yeah, and we already have an issue with the U.S. just simply investing in their company per employee. Like, I think they spend it's like $25,000 to $30,000 or something like that for investment in an employee over their career or something like that. Canada's like 15. It's a good 40% less than what the States is doing. So that's a huge, huge thing. We need to invest in our own country and in our own workers again.
With retaliatory tariffs on some goods and a lower Canadian dollar, businesses will face higher import costs. Canadian businesses, and I'm looking at them, buy roughly half of their machinery and equipment from the United States.
Exactly.
In addition, profit margins are squeezed because higher costs are gradually passed on to final goods prices in Canada.
And this goes back to Mr. Carney's, I have no idea what world he's living in as an economist, saying that you could tax the big polluting manufacturers and have that not in some way, shape, or form make its way to the consumer. I'm sorry. It just doesn't work like that.
So what would this all mean for economic growth? Well, in our January projection with no tariffs, we forecast growth of about 1.8% in both 2025 and 2026. But in the tariff scenario, the level of Canadian output falls almost 3% over 2 years. That's the blue line. That implies tariffs would all but wipe out growth in the economy for those 2 years. But if we are faced with a prolonged trade conflict, the only way to offset this negative structural change is with a positive structural change. Now, structural policies are appropriately the responsibility of elected governments and parliaments, not the Bank of Canada. So I will tread lightly here. The bank has previously highlighted Canada's productivity challenge, and it's good to see more focus by federal and provincial governments on structural reforms to increase productivity and investment by strengthening our economic union. Good. Removing rules that restrict interprovincial trade or harmonizing or mutually recognizing provincial regulations could provide some offset to the increased trade friction with the...
And this is huge. Absolutely huge. Obviously, Red Seal is the perfect example when it comes to trades and how you can get your fourth year and essentially be paid as a journeyman in your city. But the next step, which is a independent step from your schooling in each individual province, is the Red Seal exam, which allows you to be a ticketed tradesman and have your certification noticed by the entire country, right? So that's something that needs to be dealt with in every single field that we have any type of not wage loss, but like if we need more of these workers, if we need more nurses, if we need more RMTs, or if we need more EMS workers and all this type of stuff, there should be just an exam, and there should be a way to simply carry that over, and it shouldn't be complicated and it shouldn't be expensive. They've gone through the training. Each province in Canada, I think we can assume, should probably train each of these very important jobs quite well. I mean, we're in Canada, right? Like, I don't think Saskatchewan would do something crazy to their nurses that wouldn't allow them to be fully regulated in British Columbia, right? Like, that to me just doesn't make sense. So I think that would be a huge step. And then on top of it too, because a lot of people in Canada move from province to province, and they go where it's affordable. They go where they can buy homes. They go to these places that need need people, right? Like police officers, healthcare workers, railroad workers. I mean, those guys are in a little bit of a different situation because, but nevertheless, if you bring the opportunity for people to move around the country more often, it opens up the ability for them to buy and sell and, look at opportunities, and then it frees up certain homes for other people to move into, right? So, if there's an area that's more retirement oriented and the people in there can't afford to be here, but, it's mainly just townhouses here anyways. That's what I'm just talking about, the Okanagan, Vernon. So, a lot of people can go to another town that they can still potentially make good money at because they still have their good paying career, right? And it'll free up some of those homes. It'll let people get into the market and that type of thing. So I think there's a lot of benefits that could come, and COVID showed us that in the first place, that we just, like, the demand for healthcare workers and stuff, and this is mainly healthcare workers in my opinion. Like, we don't even have a walk-in clinic here in Vernon anymore, and it's not because of doctors. We have doctors. It's because of the rest of the healthcare workers and the administrative staff that we need, that we're just short of.
The United States. Provinces could also make it easier for workers to move within Canada by mutually recognizing different labor accreditations. There is also scope for all levels of government to reduce the timelines and uncertainty related to regulatory approvals. And better east-west transportation links would make trade within Canada less expensive.
I'm sorry. I don't care about what your opinion is. I don't care about the environmental impacts. Yes, there will be negatives, but Canada needs its pipeline. It needs a pipeline. And you can't give me any of this BS talking about how it's not good for our environment when all we're doing is taking the pollution that would be in Canada and shipping it across the seas to somewhere that's even worse because we just didn't want to put the pipeline here. Like, I'm sorry, I understand the environmental implications that come with it. It's a net positive for our country. And like I said, I think a lot of people would rather invest in Canada because we know that we're going to utilize this product better. We're going to treat it better. We're going to refine it better. We're going to do things a little bit better than it would be done elsewhere. So I just can't wrap my head around this simple-minded thought process of, the environment is so important, which it is, that we just shouldn't do anything in Canada just to preserve the way it is. And I'm not talking about clear cutting our whole northern section. Like, we just need a pipeline. And I think we can do more good for the world net positive wise if we have the ability to create our own wealth in sovereignty, right? Like, we're so brought up by our neighbors down south because we've created this situation where we pretty much rely on all their infrastructure and systems to refine and use our stuff because it makes our carbon footprint a little bit smaller because we're not doing that stuff in Canada. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me. I think we need to get with the times. Unfortunately, there is going to be big changes coming up in the world and in this country over the next little bit, and I think we need to be at the forefront of it and get ahead of what's going on because I want my country to be amazing again. And Canada is kind of the pretty much just a carnival up here. So anyways, thanks for tuning in again. I know it's been a while, but like, follow, subscribe. Thanks for tuning into the channel, and don't forget to adopt little pups like Bruin. See you guys.